For our next example, you will need your graphing calculator. I give you the function f of x equals x squared minus 3x minus 2. Your job is to use this equation and your graphing calculator to get an actual graph of that function in order to answer the questions on what interval is f negative, on what interval is f decreasing, find the relative minimum and where it occurs, and then to evaluate some actual points on that graph. So go ahead and get your graphing calculator out. If you're like me, you probably haven't used your graphing calculator for a while, so it's always a good practice just to clear it totally so that you know there's nothing funny running in the background. So to do that, we're going to hit second, plus, then 7, 1, 2. When you do that, you should get this message that says RAM cleared. That means that your calculator is clear and ready to go. So now, to enter my equation, I'm going to go to y equals and type in x squared minus 3x minus 2. The x button is right next to alpha. Squared is up diagonal from the 7. Minus 3x. And then minus 2. I'm going to double, triple check just to make sure that it really does match what's on my paper. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit graph. When I do that, I see this nice parabola show up. If you entered yours correctly, you should see a similar screen on your calculator. Now I want to take what's on my calculator screen and I'm going to draw it on my notes. So I'm going to draw my x and y axis. It doesn't have to be the prettiest thing in the world, but it should be a pretty good representation of what you see on your screen. I'm going to try that over because it actually wasn't very pretty. There we go. All right, so now I've sketched the graph of f of x in the window provided, and I need to answer some questions like, when is f negative, when is f decreasing? And really, when I do that, I need to find some important points on this graph. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and maybe try to scroll up. There we go. In order to find all those intervals, I need to find my x-intercepts and my vertex. So we're going to get our graphing calculator back out again, and let's start with our x-intercepts. To do that, I'm going to hit second and then trace. I'm going to scroll down. The word 0 is another word for x-intercept. So I hit enter, and I see this little cursor, this little blinky dot. I'm going to move that cursor onto this first x-intercept, or pretty close to it. And I notice that underneath I see the question left bound. When I see that question, that means go to the left of the point that you're interested in. So I move my little blinky dot just a little to the left of this x-intercept and hit enter. Now I'll go back to my x-intercept and I see the question right bound, which means I'm going to take my little blinky dot and move just a little to the right of that x-intercept, hit enter. Now I see a question that says guess. Before I hit enter here, I notice I have two arrows showing up on my calculator screen. If I kind of trace down in between those two arrows, I do hit the x-intercept that I want. So I'm good to go. I'll hit enter one more time when it says guess, and I see that the 0 is at negative 0.56. We'll round this 1 to the number 2, comma 0. Negative 0.562, comma 0. So I'll go back to my notes and I'll label this x-intercept. Negative 0.562, comma 0. I need to find this other x-intercept, so I'll go back to my calculator and follow the same kind of steps. Remember, we hit second and then trace. Number 2 says the word 0. I take my little blinky dot and I move it to the x-intercept that I want. Whoops, too far. And I see the question left bound. So that means take your little blinky dot and move it just a little to the left of that x-intercept. Hit enter. Now I see the question right bound. Take your little blinky dot and move it a little to the right of that x-intercept. Hit enter. If you trace in between those two arrows, you do hit the x-intercept that you want. So I'm going to hit enter one more time. And I get that the other 0 is at 3.56. We're going to round this number to 2, comma 0. So parentheses 3.562, comma 0. I also want this vertex. So I'll go back to my graphing calculator. I'll hit second and then trace. Another word for that vertex, it is a relative minimum. So we're going to go to number 3 that says minimum. I'll go to the point in question. So I'm pretty much at the vertex there. And now I want to go a little to the left of that vertex. I'll hit enter. Again, I see the question right bound. I want to go a little to the right of that vertex. Hit enter again. If I go in between these two very wide arrows, somewhere in there is the vertex, so I'll hit enter one more time. And I get that the minimum is, we'll round this to 1.5, comma, negative 4.25. I'll use these points to continue answering the questions about the function.